Hello and welcome back to Gamecom. Today we're going to take a look at Star Trek Voyager Elite Force. Now, most people are more familiar with the sequel, Star Trek Elite Force 2. And I'm not exactly sure why, because I find this game in particular to be a little bit more enjoyable than Elite Force 2. And part of the reason is well, as you can see, it's from Raven. And so Raven and id Software, they actually have a very close relationship. And, you know, it's probably well over a month ago, I did a video of Quake. And a few months, or in fact a year prior to that, I did a whole bunch of id Software shooter games like Doom and Wolfenstein 3D. So, needless to say, I'm a huge fan of id Software, but I am also a huge fan of Star Trek. And I think combining these two elements can make for a great game. And here we take a look at possibly the best one, Elite Force 1. Now, Elite Force 1 takes place on board the USS Voyager, obviously. I like that the show, not the show, gosh, I'm already getting mixed up. I like that this game is very much like the show, and the format is very similar. Now, of course, the beginning of this game here, is very game-like, but as the game progresses, you'll notice, and I'll point it out when it happens, that this game actually becomes more and more like the TV show Voyager, Star Trek Voyager. And if you've seen the TV show, you'll know what I mean. So, Star Trek Voyager, a lot of people say it's not a great show. Personally, I think it's fine. I think it's very entertaining. It has some interesting characters, particularly, Captain Janeway and the Doctor, and those are my two favorite characters in Star Trek Voyager. Not my most favorite Star Trek series, but there's a lot that you can do with Voyager, and Elite Force really took advantage of the things that could be done with this particular spin-off of the Star Trek lore. First of all, for those that don't know, Star Trek Voyager takes place sort of in the Gamma Quadrant, the Delta Quadrant. Voyager went through some kind of wormhole or something like that, and they ended up right on the other side of the galaxy. And if they, went full speed back to Earth, it would take them 70 years to get home. And so that's what the TV show is about. Now, of course, the crew of Voyager, they don't have Starfleet and other familiar organizations to help them along the way. They have to duke it out on their own as they try to, track back to Earth. Now, this game takes a spin on that concept. The fact that the Voyager crew have to encounter so many threats throughout the years without any help, but they're literally on their own in the galaxy. They need to take extra precautions that most other starship crews would never need to take. So in the game is sort of like a spin-off of the TV show. The TV show never explored this aspect, but this game sort of implies that they also had a special task force to tackle these really dangerous situations that was created by the crew of the USS Voyager. Now, this character here. So, by the way, before we move on to this character you're supposed to free from the cell, you play as Monroe, and you get to pick both male and female. It doesn't matter. But this guy is supposed to be a goofball. Like, he's supposed to be like the comedic relief, but it just doesn't work. His jokes are not particularly clever. He's just, I don't know, he's just there to add, I guess, a dynamic to the characters that you have here. And many of these characters are, made up. They are not seen in the TV show, even though many of the characters in the TV show do get appearances in this game. Now, we're only going to cover two parts of this game, because to be honest, it is a struggle to get this game to work on a modern PC. Fortunately, I do have a retro computer running Windows 98 and Windows 2000, and it's pretty powerful. It has like a GeForce 4 graphics card and stuff, so I guess I could try to run this game on that computer so that I can avoid any compatibility issues. But at the same time, I don't know if it will help, because this might be a corrupt version of the game, because I can't find my Elite Force CD, so I had to use a downloaded torrented version of the game. So I remember this game working on Windows 7 no problem, and yes, I am still using Windows 7. So for those that want to try out this game, it should work on the modern PC, assuming you have the official release of this game. Now, the Borg, at first they're not threatening, because they don't run to you. They just walk to you. They're overly confident. And of course, this weapon you're using is called the iMod. It's the second weapon you pick up. It's basically a Borg-proof weapon. It can break through their shields no problem. I think it's probably because, you know, if you're familiar with Star Trek, we'll know that the Borg can adapt to any threat. And so let's say you have a phaser, right? And your phaser shoots a beam of energy that's set to a certain frequency. Once the Borg figure out that frequency, they can filter out that frequency or create a shield that deflects that particular frequency. And the iMod, I believe, this weapon you're using right now, keeps changing its frequency for every shot. So now, unlike Quake 3, which, by the way, this game is using the Quake 3 engine, aka the ITTech 3 engine. And as you can see, there's also a bit of strafe jumping because it's the same engine, which is really neat, because I love strafe jumping in these games. And if you don't know what strafe jumping is, just watch my part 2 of Quake, the first Quake. But yeah, like I was saying, unlike Quake 3, you actually do have an alt fire, much like, you know, Unreal Tournament. You have the standard fire, which, you know, in this case with the iMod is a simple beam of energy, whereas the alt fire is more powerful. It can do, you know, much more powerful blasts. Again, I'm not a huge nut when it comes to Star Trek. I'm a fan of Star Trek in general, but I don't know the physics and all of the techno stuff that goes on in Star Trek. So I'm just gonna say that this weapon is a lot like the shock rifle from Unreal Tournament. So this goofball right here, he doesn't let me destroy that Borg. He just destroys the bridge, and he thinks he's doing me a favor, but whatever. Anyway, so like I said earlier, this game lets you choose between male and female, and both the male and female versions of Monroe, you know, the character you play as, are fully voiced, just like Mass Effect. And back in the year 2000, that was actually pretty cool, because, you know, around in the late 90s and, you know, turn of the new century, most games, you know, didn't have voice acting, and the ones that did had very limited, I guess you could say, dialogue elements in them. So this full voice acting throughout, even during the actual game itself, you don't have to resort to just reading text, and it makes the game more immersive, and the characters more, well, it's like watching a TV show, actually, because there's a lot of cutscenes that are very much like in the style of Star Trek Voyager. So these levels are for the most part very linear, but very well designed. You don't get stuck too badly. There were maybe one or twice that I got stuck first time playing this game. But the presentation is very good. Again, back in the year 2000, this was actually quite good. But the one complaint I do have is ironically not really a complaint that I have with the game, but a complaint I have with Star Trek Voyager, the TV show, and also with other Star Trek shows at the time like Deep Space Nine, and that is the music is really, really, really boring. And it's not really the game's fault. The game is trying to be as authentic as possible. The problem is the TV show has really, really bland music. Now, the theme song of Star Trek Voyager is good. It's catchy, it's memorable, mostly probably because the composer of that theme song was Jerry Goldsmith, one of my most favorite composers of all time. But I'm willing to bet that Jerry Goldsmith was not involved in each episode, because if he was, the music would sound a lot better. But Star Trek just has that very generic, just listen to the music. It's just a bunch of chords and melodies that don't really have a real structure to them. They're just designed to portray a certain emotion, but even then it doesn't really take that emotion to an emotional high like you do in some of the Star Trek motion pictures or other movies like in Star Wars or Back to the Future and Indiana Jones. It's a real shame, and unfortunately this game has to sort of do the same as the TV shows because of this philosophy of being as authentic as possible to the TV show. As you can see, Monroe was being too hasty, caused the death of everyone. Also, we think, as you can see, it's a holodeck. So I'm just going to be quiet here because I think this is a pretty good cutscene.
Mr. Monroe, your tactical approach was, shall we say...
And as you can see, they get all the same actors from the TV show. So Tuvok is in this, and Janeway, Ensign Kim, you name it, everyone is in this game, which is pretty cool.
Sir, if I may, how was I supposed to know the panel would explode?
That point is not relevant, Mr. Monroe. A given situation is not as predictable as you might desire. Your reckless decision has caused the death of you and your teammates. You have failed.
I love how Tuvok is just straightforward Vulcan. He just says it how it is.
Had you followed standard hazard team procedures, you may have survived the simulation and achieved your mission objectives.
Yes, sir. Procedure.
Speak freely, Ensign. Deck 4.
With all due respect, sir, I don't think procedure would have mattered. There wasn't any way I could have possibly rescued them.
Someday, Mr. Monroe, you may be called upon to do the impossible. Consider this to be your personal Kobayashi Maru.
Red alert! All hands to battle stations.
Computer, reroute turbolift to the bridge.
And we're going to go on to the next part, so we're going to see what the great emergency is.